how much of this $500 billion Stargate story is real? I mean, is it actually going to happen in that size?
Hi, Matt. I hope you're doing well. We do think that the, Stargate thing is really real, at least so far. We're seeing it across a lot of the tech companies. There's so many that are involved, but it's such a large number, and we still have to see it come through.
So is this going to be a situation where we have foreign-owned companies coming in here and just operating manufacturing plants in the U.S.? Because it seems like that runs to some extent counter to what Donald Trump was hoping for.
I think any investment here in the U.S. is being looked at very positively. Overall, just digital infrastructure really is something that the U.S. government, needs to make sure that we are at the forefront. Similar to having a strategic petroleum reserve, we really need to make sure we have that digital infrastructure that is strategic, just given, the proliferance of AI, just how it's going to be used going forward. And there's so many unknowns still related to AI.
So are we going to see a jump in employment? I mean, is the Fed going to have to pay attention to this? Or are we looking at, just giant sort of server farms and electric plants that are going to be needed?
Sure. I think we're still in the early phases of discovering what the productivity improvements are going to be. I think it's really clear so far that there are some, but I think there's also some challenges in regards to what is this going to mean for like the entry-level workforce, those kids who are just graduating college, and when knowledge is being democratized because of AI, how do you get them trained? How do you give them the experience that they need in order to validate what AI is telling you?
It does look like, Ayako, this is the tariff strategy is forcing TSMC and Foxconn and other foreign-owned companies to come here and produce. What about American companies like NVIDIA and AMD that are going to have to pay 15% of the revenue on the Chinese business they do? What about these export taxes? How's that going to affect businesses here?
Sure. I mean, I think it's sort of just the pay-to-play issue that we're seeing here. But on the flip side, I mean, NVIDIA noted that China is a $50 billion total addressable market, and I don't think we want to exclude that. And we want to make sure that it's American technology that is going to be the base of overall AI.
I notice in your notes you're very focused on the economic data coming in, the Fed meeting at Jackson Hole, which obviously is key. Rates are incredibly important to your business. What do you expect from Jerome Powell? Are we going to see a policy shift?
I'm not sure if we're going to see a policy shift so much. Perhaps they'll talk about the average inflation targeting that they sort of introduced a few years ago. But, for the most part, we are looking to see if they are going to signal any sort of openness to that rate cut in September that the market's already pricing in, just given some of the, numbers that we've seen so far this year regarding both inflation and unemployment. But that PPI number last week really threw a little bit of a wrench into the story. Yeah,
3.7% on the core. Does 4.5%, does the Fed target rate right now feel restrictive to you?
A little bit. I believe that, in normal times, I think we're looking at a Fed funds rate closer to 3 to 3.5%. And so, having current rates above 4 is still a little restrictive. And you're seeing it with those cyclical companies. I mean, thankfully, most corporations have pretty solid balance sheets, just given the opportunity to refinance back during the COVID years. But we're, 5 years post that, and so having a little bit lower interest rate in order to refinance further is going to be helpful for many of those cyclical companies.
It does seem like cyclical companies, industrials, real estate investment trusts are now far more important to the tech picture than they once were.
Absolutely. The digital infrastructure really is something that investors have been looking at beyond just the actual chips and servers that are powering AI. We're definitely looking at real estate, definitely looking at industrials that provide power, cooling infrastructure, and all of that to the data centers. And so there's definitely a broadening out. It's just that it's all still related to one major theme, which is AI.